All right, hello everyone. Kind of cover the where I am, what I've been doing, what I've been working on. Basically, I got most of the 1v1 group logic all set. So if you remember the 1v1 stuff, we have that's not sure. Anyways, basically we have all these different kind of states that we have to go through. Where we need to have the user connect, create a group, select 3 characters, lock 3 characters, and then they are put into the matchmaker queue. So the server now is basically well tested for those types of cases. So I created a ton of different tests to make sure that all the logic works, like selecting characters first, second, third slot, make sure they can't select invalid slots, locking slots, and if we just run this package real quick, you can see the coverage we're getting now. So if we run package tests, got about 50% coverage. It's not too bad, but yeah, it goes through all of the processing the group messages for create requests. Yeah, character selected, locked in, enter queue, requested. Does some validation now to make sure that only the leader ID, which is the client that initiated it, can do it, as well as exiting queues. So if they decide to quit out, again, I'm checking in this case if only the leader is allowed to do that. I may change that, but we'll see. I also changed the group a bit, so it has a little bit more definition to it of like entering queues and exiting queues and broadcast, because as I was designing the world stuff, I realized that the world or the session will need to broadcast messages to the entire group, and then the broadcast method will be able to match that to the group players. So in 1v1, it's obviously pretty straightforward. They would just go right to it. 3v3, I would have to iterate through all of them. And when you're doing games that like PvP games, basically, you really need to be careful about what type of messages you send to which clients and what state you kind of give them. It's always better to err on giving the player only what they can see and nothing else, because especially with a game like this where it's a WebSocket, it's using JSON for now, but even if it was just message pack, it would be super easy to just decompile it and then see all of the state of the other teams, where their characters are, what tiles they're in, etc. So basically the group, the session in the world needs to send only group 1 known information to group 1. So whatever a group 1 can see would be included in that state, and same for group 2. So yeah, broadcast is all set, and the matchmaker is pretty well tested at this point too. I re-enabled the queue. I don't have that tested yet, but again, once the more than one group is in queue, we iterate over all the game queues, balance the teams, and then see if there's any available sessions. If there is, we kick them out of the matchmaker, and then we create the game session, and then game session will basically create, depending on the type, a new game, as well as a new game session, which we then pass to the world, as well as with an unregister function or closure. This way that they can, once the world ends, they can basically deregister themselves from this world's map here. Of course, we could, if we're using Redis, we would dispatch a pub sub message saying remove from Redis or whatever. But again, we're just using maps because it's easier. And yeah, the unregistered will just unlock it and then delete it from the map. So that's where we're at for sessions. I'm feeling that it's time to look at designing the levels. And by designing, I mean taking what Atlas Reactor did. And if you've never seen Atlas Reactor before, this is kind of what their maps looked like. Let me zoom in a bit here. So you can see it's very much a tile-based 2D array. So we can have, these are stealth. These are cells that offer cover. So if you're behind this, you'll have a decreased amount of damage you'll take, maybe like a 25% shield or something. You have power-ups like energy, health, I forget, might, I think they call it, basically a strength buff or damage buff, shields, and so on. So, and usually you would start in these cells here, or tiles, or whatever you want to call them. And while it's not in here, I'm explicitly adding them to make it a nice clean shape, otherwise it would just be kind of weird. So I started to translate what this would look like into my level, and this is basically what it looks like. I've only done a little bit of the bottom and the tops, but you can see if we can, oh man, I'm used to my other computer. If we look at, for example, these tiles here, this is going to be a wall, so we have like 2 walls. We have 2 walls, 2 walls here, 2 walls here, 4 walls here, 4 walls here, and then open spots with a stealth attribute bound to it. And then the rest is pretty much, it follows a similar flow. And I really wish I could get it to format so it would I could save it so it was figured out that nice grid feeling, but every time that I hit save, it basically, like if I wanted to, the Go format will just reset it, which is kind of annoying. I may in the future just create a stupid little web UI to basically design levels in, or I'm thinking of doing like at least playing with procedurally generating levels. So you'd have like, here's a wall, and then it's going to, if there's a wall, there's a higher chance that I'll put stealth next to it or barriers next to it, or wall edges. Or fences, I guess I'm calling them fences. So that's kind of where I'm going for the level layouts. I'll probably do 1 or 2 to begin with just to play around. And then the tiles, I started to kind of think about some more. So I added abilities, attributes to basically do a bit mask check to see if it's set. So you can, like for the tile test, you can see here, if we have a tile type of open with an eastern fence, we can call this to say, does this have an eastern fence? Or I'll probably add other methods like, does it have, basically, once I get to the point where I need to do ray casting between 2 points, I'll need to do checks to see if any of these attributes exist along the path. And I found a couple of, there's some common, I can't remember the name of them, but some ray casting algorithms. One that was developed in like 1960, it still seems to be really good. So I'll probably use something like that. But yeah, it's looking like it's going to come together for the levels. And then I started to think about the world state. So I designed this for the happy path. So we have the server starting the game, which creates the session, which calls begin play in the world, which sets everything up, loads the level. And then that's going to broadcast back to both the groups with the level information. And I'm still undecided if I want to bake in the levels into the client or just send that kind of blob. And it would be, if I get to a point where procedurally generated stuff is kind of interesting and neat, it would be cool to just like have the server generate a random level and then people could play on it. But again, when you get into competitive play stuff, people don't like random. They want to know the same levels. They want to get better at the same levels. So it's probably not a great idea. But so the other option is just take these levels, copy them over to Unreal C++, or for my current UI, the web server stuff, and just have an identifier like level 0, level 1, etc. So from that, we get the group ones that say, okay, the game's loaded, send that off to the session. Same with group 2. Once they're both set, it's going to kick off a world timer. It's going to announce to the groups that the timer has started. And then this is where the players will send their actions and validate. The server's going to validate each one. So they're going to send their dash action, their blast action, and their move action. And if you've never seen, I don't know if this is going to work over the stream, YouTube, weird Japanese stuff. Anyways, what am I looking at? Alice Reactor gameplay. So this one, you can kind of get a sense for like when they first start, they have this initial timer of 20 seconds where they first decide where they're going to move, and then so you can see your other teammates, what they're going to do for their moves, and then they lock in, or they just let the timer expire. Most people just let the timer expire, and then it gives like a 5-second remaining thing. But you can kind of see where everybody's going, and then from there, everybody moves, and then you start to see the opponent's team. And this is where it gets interesting. So they're going to choose their attacks, and then you can obviously have visual recognition of not only your attacks, but what your teammates are going to attack. So you can kind of do some coordination. You see here the fences where they get that shield bonus. This person does some really weird movements, but anyways. Some other interesting aspects you'll notice is, although this is tile-based, you can see that they can still go horizontally. So I had to think about that too. You can't just have someone move awkwardly in right angles. So I'm going to have to figure out how to do some work on that for pathing. But yeah, so then they have the blast phase where everybody does their attacks basically at the same time. But it's obviously shown in a serial fashion. And then after this, they have their move state. So then they move, and then the process repeats. So you can see in the top corner, in the top middle, they have the number of turns, and also their abilities have counters for how many times they can use it, the cooldowns rather. So these are all things that I have to think about, as well as the abilities and everything else that goes into a game like this. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fun. Anyways, back to so there's those 4 states, the dash, which happens before the blast, which allows you to escape, and then all the other actions. So those have to be sent. I'll probably send them as they click them. It'll send it. And then once the timers, so basically I'm going to have probably a buffer or a queue that builds up the actions that they sent, and then basically condense it to the last 3 actions that are valid for them. Because they might do things and then change it, or they might do things and never lock in. So I'm not 100% sure that they're going to be doing that until I have that full state of their actions. So basically compress it to those 3 actions that are available, validate that they're valid, and then accept them and do the same thing. This is going to obviously happen at the same time for group 1 and group 2, but yeah, that's the way charts work. So then the timer runs out, and then it basically sends the entire state of all the actions that are going to occur for both groups. Obviously, we have to be careful with what information you send, but at the same point, if group 1 can see what group 2 is doing, you'd want to send that information so that they can render it on the client. And then once the state has been sent, it's going to basically go through all of those actions and then run the animation. So there's going to be moving and attacking and various particle effects going off. And we need to, some people are going to probably be faster than others. They'll receive it later. So we need the clients or the groups to send when their animations are complete. And then we can start that timer again and then re-begin the whole sending actions and deciding and all that stuff. So that's pretty much what the world's going to look like. Some other things I still need to figure out. Pathing for sure. I'll probably calculate it as being right angles for their movements and then just deduct how many points it would take to move in a more horizontal or linear fashion. And then what else do I need to determine? Characters, like I don't even know how I'm going to store the character data yet. I mean, I kind of have an idea of like having modifiers or properties. So there's going to be like base health and shield and armor and all that stuff. Max distance. And yeah, and each character, like if it's a tank, it probably should have more hit points, which should do less damage. So I have to come up with a nice way to formalize and make sure that it's balanced. So it's going to be pretty interesting. I've never had to do that before. Yeah, that's pretty much where... Oh, and I have to keep track of state. So every single action that they do, as I mentioned, you have to build that buffer of what they're doing. And then I want to save all that information because I'll be able to go back and kind of either replay it. So you can kind of replay, see how people play, as well as see if there's any issues with the map designs. Like, oh, these are dead areas, no one ever goes there. Maybe they're not necessary. You can make it smaller so that the action is more fast-paced. So yeah, basically I'm going to store almost every single click and every action. So it's going to be pretty interesting to collect that data. other interesting things that I need to work on. Oh, I decided to use phaser. Let's copy this. So I am going to do a UI, a very basic UI in a web browser, and I decided to use phaser. I looked at Pixie something or other. Where's my browser? Did I close it? I think I closed it. I totally closed it. That is not the right key combination. So this seems pretty simple to work with. I was going through their documentation a little bit today just to see how things are laid out. And I wanted to use TypeScript because I don't like dynamically typed languages. And yeah, that's pretty much what I decided on. So one thing I didn't really understand was how to, like, I'm used to having like a tick or an update or something, and I don't see that here. So I don't know how this all still kind of works. I think I can just add an update method to this scene, and then it'll just get called. But it has built-in like tweens, as you can see. It has built-in interpolation functions and all the other good stuff that you'd want. So it'll be easier for me to knock stuff out really quickly, as opposed to getting everything working in Unreal Engine first and then spending God knows how much time getting all the WebSocket stuff and translating all of the structures to the JSON messages. And I don't even know what JSON, I think, yeah, Unreal Engine has a JSON parser. Pretty sure. JSON. That's all FAs. Yeah, there we go. JSON object. Yep. So I don't know what type of, oh, okay, so it looks like a kind of like a getter pattern where you just get or pass the path of what you need, which is fine because my objects are super tight. They're just going to be very small. Also, I don't know how to, I want to use message pack at some point, and I don't know how to get that into Unreal. Probably just have to include it as a third party dependency or whatever. But yeah, that's another thing to figure out. So characters, I'm thinking for, wow, that's messed up. Okay. For character definition and abilities, I want to keep it in probably like a CSV file that I can just load both in Unreal and this engine. So it'll basically be all the abilities that characters have in just a nice tight little CSV file. That way I can bake in some of the Unreal Engine has some abilities for reading in like asset paths, so I can include that, and then it would just automatically handle all the character creation stuff for me. Oh, and another thing I did do was I purchased for myself where is my battleometer? There it is. I purchased some assets for the characters to give myself kind of a better idea of what the kind of shapes are, because again, it's all going to be geometry. So if we look at the maps, where is the maps? And I'll make this bigger in a second here. So these things are like totally nuts, and I love them because they're just, I don't know, they're totally crazy, and I love it. So they have all these different types of materials, like various glowing and like shimmering, and yeah, they're just, so this is basically what the character is going to be like, and they're going to have all their abilities bound to them. And then I'll probably play with a couple of these. I'm really interested in learning some of these materials and how they're made. So I'll probably go through a bunch of that stuff too, because that'll be fun. Yeah, and then I have to figure out particle effects. I'll probably just buy some janky stuff just to start, and then if this thing actually is like decent, I'll consider paying someone to build it. But yeah, so that's pretty much where I'm going with this. I don't have I'm not really going to do any live coding right now because I'm still thinking and reading, and I don't think that's very interesting for people, so I'm not going to record that. But yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at. All right, I will have hopefully something demonstratable by Sunday, Japan time, Sunday night. So yeah, hopefully I can show something off then, because I'd really like to get like a level there and moving. Like that'll be, then I'll know I'm making good progress. Right now it's all still server side, headless, unknown what things are going to look like and do in React. So yeah, stay tuned.